Hey, what's up guys, Metal571 here, back again with another review, and this is the ZMF Omni Blackwood edition. So this is a great closed back headphone. It's almost completely closed back, and it's a really cool boutique headphone. If you've seen my other ZMF headphones reviews, you'll see that these are basically customized to your liking. You can go to ZMF Headphones website, which I'll link in the description, and customize these however you would like and order them. So without further ado, let's talk about the hardware. So what is this? This is a Fostex T50RP modified quite heavily, and the details of the modifications I am not particularly familiar with, but the result is really awesome. This is the current flagship of the ZMF headphone line. It is about 80 to 90% closed back headphone, and in my experience it isolates about as well as a closed back while still having, as you can see, some ports here. The bass on this one does not seem to be customizable, unlike the Vibro and the Blackwood. However, Zach will always tune your headphones to your liking. There is some wiggle room there in terms of what you would like to hear and what he can accomplish. If you receive the headphone and you find you want, less mids, more treble, less bass, he can make some tweaks and send it back to you, which is something you don't really get from any other headphone manufacturer here. But this is the Omni. This is the flagship. The Blackwood version has Blackwood wood on the cups, hence the name. There's also cherry and walnut, and maybe some others as well. It keeps changing around. You always have a large variety of woods to choose from when you order a ZMF headphone. But essentially, it's still a T50RP that's been modified. These are the lambskin pads. Also available are some protein leather pads. There are also some cowhide pads. These, I believe, are the softest. I'm not exactly sure what the sound difference is, but I'm sure you can find that out quite easily. But just for the sake of comparison, what I'm reviewing right here is a ZMF Omni Blackwood with lambskin pads. So that is the specific sound I'm going to be describing later in the video. This one also has the pilot pad, which is very comfortable, lots of cushion here, and it really is a huge upgrade over the stock version of the headphone. Quite a bit. We also have removable cables here. These are mini XLR jacks and pretty standard, so you can use whatever cable you want. I think you can use balanced cables on these as well, of course, since there are two separate inlets here for each channel. There's no specific, something that I didn't mention before is there's no specific L and R indicators for left and right on these, but the way you can tell pretty easily is the pads in the front here are quite, they don't stick out very much, and there's a crease, and in the back they're way thicker, so this conforms around your ears very nicely, and the build quality is of course very good. The cups, I believe, are 3D printed, really well designed, very consistent, and the ear pads, speaking of comfort next, as usual, amazingly, insanely deep. I had no problem whatsoever with comfort. However, you will have to get used to the clamping. They do hold themselves on your head, and they weigh a decent amount more than your average dynamic headphone. But once you get used to that, you could wear them forever because there's lots of padding here. There's lots of padding on the ear pads, so it's very comfortable for long sessions, as long as you don't mind a bit of clamp and a bit of weight. You can get used to it. I certainly had no problem, but you may want to give them a shot, if possible, to demo at your local headphone meet if you get a chance. So, now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about the sound. Now, the bass on these is awesome. It goes really low. It's definitely boosted, so it's more like a Vibro than like the regular Blackwood. The Omni kind of has a subwoofer-like bass to it, and it's pretty interesting because there's a definite lift in the sub bass and the mid bass. I actually prefer that sound, and I think it sounds more neutral, and I feel that the HG600 with no EQ sounds kind of dead in the low bass, and I feel like this is much closer to what I would personally consider neutral. There's a video I want to make in the future about neutrality. I'll get into what sound I'm comparing all of these other headphones I've reviewed against in that video in more detail, but basically, if you're used to an HD600, this is way more bass. This is a lot more, and it's not huge amounts. It's not as much as a DT770 80 ohm, definitely not. Though it's funny because the sound kind of reminds me of that in the bass, compared to, like, for example, the ZMF Blackwood, which was a much more flat line kind of a headphone. Had good extension, but not a lot of impact. This has got both, and I thought that's really awesome. Otherwise, no obvious colorations in the bass. However, the mid-range, as you go to transition into the mid-range, there seems to be some kind of dip, and this kind of has a hi-fi system sound to it. What I mean by that is, if you had a subwoofer and the crossover to your woofers on your regular speakers in your speaker system was kind of a big, 15-inch subwoofer to like some small woofers, I don't know, like 6 inches on the speakers woofers. And that transition will pretty much lead you to what seems to be a similar sound to these. And so you have a little bit of a scoop going on through 300, 500, something like that hertz. And so the body in vocals kind of gets sucked out a bit with these. I'm not sure if that's the way this wood is, if that's what the pads do, but that's what I'm hearing. But other than that, the mid-range sounds pretty uncolored. I personally, again, prefer that the upper mid-range is a couple dB back. I think the level, comparing them directly to the HD600, the level of the 3.5K peak that's supposed to be there and uncompensated frequency responses is about the same, actually. These have about the same amount of upper mid-range as an HD600 in my listening. So take that for what it is. But overall, so far, we've got a bass lift that extends really low. And then as we go into the mids, I know this is backwards for you guys, but this is bass. And then as we go into the mids, there's a bit of a dip in the low mids. And then the mids come to the usual peak they should be at, although I personally prefer them to be about 3 dB less, like I EQ my 600s. But it's about the 600s amount of upper mid-range. However, the low mids are definitely more sucked out on these. And the treble. The treble, as usual in classic ZMF fashion, is easygoing and rolled off up top. However, it is better extended than the Blackwood or the Vibro. Thankfully, it has a glassiness to it that you don't quite get on the Blackwood or the Vibro. However, it still doesn't feel like it extends as much as I would prefer. This is the only downside, it seems, to the way these are modified, is you just will not get that air in the treble that you can get from very expensive electrostatic headphones and EQing up the treble on an HG600 a little bit, that kind of thing. So that's, if I had to pick out a flaw other than the low mid-range dip, that would probably be the other one. But as far as Soundstage, oh man, these are a killer in Soundstage. I thought the Blackwood sounded fantastic, and it was the best Soundstage I'd heard in a closed pack. This is better. This has a better Soundstage than my HD600. I mean, that's not saying that much, but for something that offers this much isolation, you could say that the ratio of amount of isolation to width of the soundstage, imaging ability of the soundstage, holographicness of the soundstage is better than anything I've ever heard before. It's unbelievable what kind of soundstage these can put out. Very, very good instrument separation, nice wide presentation, quite a bit wider than the HD600 soundstage, and in a closed back. In a closed back, too. Pretty awesome. Really, really impressive, and I think that's probably in no small part due to the semi-closed design. Now these I would actually call semi-closed because they're more closed than they are open. Unlike semi-open headphones like the K240, which are mostly open, these are mostly closed. I didn't have any appreciable leak. You can still use them in an office, but you still get the soundstage of around an open headphone. That is amazing and an incredible feat. So I was very impressed with that. As far as speed goes across the board, yeah, there's still some grain in these. They're not the most resolving, fastest, snappiest headphone with the tiniest details, but I do find that the soundstage picks out things on its own. That's better than a lot of other headphones can handle. And so these, I feel, are pretty amazing overall when you take the combination of really fun to listen to and very comfortable despite the weight. and well priced compared to things like the Odyssey LCD2, which just sounded dead to me when I heard one, and did not have anywhere near the soundstage this does. You get a really great headphone here, and I'm really impressed. So I would recommend demoing it. Give it a shot. I think it sounds about as good as you're going to get. I can't imagine a 250 RP sounding too much better than this. Even with as heavy modification as this has, this is probably about the limit right here. And that's the thing I wanted you to take away from the Omni review, is this is probably the best 250 RP mod you're going to get out there. I wouldn't be surprised if ZMF started making their own drivers like Mr. Speakers has started to do. They're not competitors, so to speak, but I mean, they appear to be as competitors. But yeah, I think that's the logical next step. If I were ZMF, I would go and create something, because this is about as good as I think you can really do with these drivers. Pretty amazing that this used to be like a $99 headphone and has morphed into this amazing creation that gives you a really unique combination of awesome comfort, awesome soundstage, very good isolation, and great sound signature with that nice, wonderful planar bass. And you get a very handcrafted approach to making these that you can further customize the sound of by contacting Zach if you're not 100% satisfied with them. So great package, highly recommended. And I think you guys knew I was going to say that, but there you go. And one last note is, these are a little bit harder to drive than the HD600, so make sure you have an amplifier. These are tough to drive. They are simply tough to drive, and you will need an amp to bring them to their full volume and full potential. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next review.